Everyone. Thank you all for being here today. We are going to get started. We're so grateful to all of you for being here. My name is Udo. I am one of the co-founders of Building African Fashion, and we're so happy to have you. We wanted to wait a few more minutes so that we could have a good number of people here, but I think we have a good number. We'll expect them more to join us, but we are happy that you are able to be here with us today. So we want to welcome you to today's session, which is Threads of Collaboration, Success Stories, and Brand Artisan Partnerships. This is the second that we're having in this series, and we're very happy to be able to continue this as part of our education series. And looking forward to the insightful conversations that will come forth from our speakers who will be introduced shortly. So to start, I want us to take a few minutes just to get to know each other, if you can. I see there's already some chat happening some conversation happening in the chat. If you can take a few minutes, just type in the chat, tell us where you're coming from. We like to see that we have a global community as an organization. And we want to make sure that we really tap into that as we come together to build a shared vision for the African fashion industry. Um, for those of you who may not know us, Building African Fashion is a collective movement dedicated to advancing ethical, sustainable, and a prosperous fashion system across Africa. Um, if you visit our website, you'll see that there are a number of different initiative areas that we walk across. One of them is our Fashion Workers Initiative, and that's the group that's responsible for putting together this event today. So for today's agenda, in a moment, I'm going to introduce one of our team members, Stacy, who's the coordinator for our Fashion Workers group, to introduce our speakers. And from there, we'll move into the heart of the discussion. I will lead a Q&A, a discussion with our speakers, two incredible industry leaders, Joyce Chimanye and Jose Hendo. They'll be sharing their experiences and insights on building strong brand artisans partnerships that uplift the African fashion industry. And after the discussion, we're going to open up the floor to all of us here to ask questions, to make any comments that we may have to help us continue to advance the discussion. We welcome your thoughts, your input, and even as we're going through the session, feel free to put your questions and your thoughts in the chat. We may address them as they come up, or we'll leave them to the end to address. So once again, I want to thank you guys all for being here today, for showing your support, and for helping us in this work that we're doing to help drive the fashion sector in Africa. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our coordinator, who was very instrumental in putting this event today together, as she introduces our speaker. So
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Udo. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. My name is Stacey Busini. I am the coordinator for this event under the Fashion Workers team. So, as Udo had mentioned, the threads of collaboration, success stories in brand artisan partnership is part of a special series where we get to dive into real world case studies of fashion brands that have teamed up with African artisans. Today marks the second edition of this series. Our first session in November was a fantastic one, whereby we had two amazing speakers, Kapa Yakoro from Kabez in Burkina Faso, and he's in fact here. So hi, Kafa, and Kathy Marshall from Sabaha in Ethiopia. For today's session, I am beyond excited for this one. We have two incredible women who will be sharing their personal experience working with artisans. So allow me to introduce Jose Hendo and Joyce Chimane. As you can see, their videos are on. So just wave. Thank you. Yes, wave to the audience. So first up, we have Jose Hendo, a British award-winning eco-sustainable designer with Ugandan roots. Jose is the founder of the Jose Hendo brand, the Back to the Roots B2TR initiative, and the R3 campaign. She's doing amazing work to revive Backcloth, a UNESCO recognized heritage textile from Uganda, and collaborates closely with local artisans to preserve this ancient craft. Through her Back to the Roots initiative, she's supporting communities, promoting sustainability, and leading tree planting campaigns. Her designs, blending African heritage and British influences, are now part of prestigious collections at places like the British Museum and the National Museum of Scotland. Please just say wave to the audience so that they may be able to see. Yes, thank you. So next we have Joyce Chumani, a powerhouse in the Zimbabwean fashion industry. Joyce is the founder and creative director at Zuva, a sustainable fashion brand committed to using 100% Zimbabwean cotton and natural fabrics. She works hand in hand with local artisans, helping them create beautiful pieces with eco-friendly materials. Beyond fashion, Joyce is passionate about education and empowerment. She founded the Fashion Design and Clothing Technology Institute, FDCTI, to teach aspiring designers and artisans, and she leads initiatives like She Care, which provides practical skills for women and girls. Joyce is also deeply involved in community development and has showcased her work at fashion events worldwide. Please, Joyce, wave to the audience so that I can see you. Thank you so much. So today's session is going to be full of aspiring stories and powerful insights. So thank you so much, Joyce and Josie, and welcome very much. Over to you, Udo.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Stacy, and welcome again to everyone here. And as we dive into the conversation with our speakers, again, I encourage you to just make note of your questions, any thoughts that you have in the comments. We'll address them as we go along or as we come to the end. And also just to recognize those that have put comments in the chat, saying hello to Samia from Tunisia, um, Mutek, Muteti from Kenya. I hope I'm saying that right. Eunice Kudzai from Zimbabwe, welcome. Rumbidizai from Zimbabwe as well, Rumbi from Zimbabwe, and Chris from Belgium. Welcome to everyone. We're happy again to have such a global audience and looking forward to a rich conversation. So the way today is going to work is that I will just present some questions to our speakers and they'll reply and just add their input as the questions come. And of course, feel free to take it in a different direction apart from the questions that I'll be presenting. Jose, I will start with you. So your work challenges the throwaway culture by championing sustainability and traditional craftsmanship. Um, what inspired you to collaborate with artisans, and how did you begin your journey in sustainable fashion?
Yes, that's hi Udo, hi everybody. Lovely to meet you all, and thank you for the opportunity to share my story with you all. It's where do I start? It's going back to my childhood, my love of clothing. That's where it all started. I love to dress up really nicely, and my mother always made things and lovely things for us. And I think that's where the love of clothing started. I mean, watching my mother get ready to go out was lovely to watch, women getting ready to go out. But then obviously you grow up, and I wanted to be an artist. So I did fine art, and I really pushed to do art. And then things changed, my direction changed, and I looked into fashion. So I did fashion design. And that's when I started working in the fashion industry, but nowhere near what I do now. I was doing, lovely women's clothing and working in bridal shops. And then I was not happy with what I was doing, and I wanted more. I really felt like fashion There's so much more that it could be. And I could see going into shops and saying, I would walk into Topshop on Oxford Street, if any of you know Oxford Street in London. You walk into Topshop and I would find clothing on the floor. You know, people were not bothered. You pick something up, you don't like it, you don't put it back on that rail, you just drop it where you are. And I thought, this can't be right. And obviously I was a fashion student then, and I loved everything to do with, you know, high fashion. So I decided when I, you know, looked more into what happens when we're done with garments, and then you could see the trends every week, every month, there's something new. And, you know, before this runs its course, is something else new coming along. And I thought, this can't be right. So what I did after, when I had my children, it was a moment when you start thinking, now you have children, what happens? You know, what is all this? You know, there has to be more to fashion. And so I went back to school. And when I went back to university, and having graduated, worked, and going back into study, I knew I had to make it work. If I didn't find another way to kind of change what I felt the fashion journey was looking for me, then I wouldn't carry on. I couldn't work for anyone doing the things I was doing, knowing I was working with polyester and these things that damage, you know, the environment. So that's what happened. I went back to school. I went back to learning. And because I decided it had to matter, and I did my research then. And the research, obviously, I had started the research before I started my study. And then everything just came together. And I couldn't, I mean, I knew I had to do this. So I had to fight against, you know, the throwaway culture and do all of these things. But never did I ever know that I would end up falling in love with something I knew as a child, but had no experience as a grown up working with. So when I went to see my parents on holiday on my research break, looking for an environmental friendly cloth, something that was rustic, something organic, something that didn't cost the earth to make, I found bark. And then, you know, the bark cloth I found, you know, my mother seemed to know exactly what to get. She seemed to know exactly what I needed. And I never asked. I only kind of like thought, you know, she just knows. It's much later that I find out, and I'll share this later in the conversation, but pretty much it's just, yeah, I did the research. I knew what needed to happen. And so here I am, advocating for sustainability and circularity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And Joyce, I'm going to come to you now to ask you also about your genesis, how you got your start, what inspired you to start Zuva, and how did your journey lead you to start collaborating with artisans? And then eventually, of course, as we know, you're also part of the Fashion Council of Zimbabwe. How did that all come together?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And Josie, thank you so much for that background story of how you started. So I started with fashion as a young high school student, where I was making my own garments. So my parents had 4 children. They were both working parents, paying school fees for the children, paying the mortgage. So we only got clothing once a year at Christmas, but we did not go in at the start of the range. We went in at the end of the range when everything had been taken, and you know the leftovers is what we, you know, my mom would afford to buy us. So that is what inspired me to start making my own garments. So from a very young age, I used to actually dress myself. Then in high school, when we had like beauty competitions or like lip singing competitions, I would take orders from the students. I would make stuff for people. For my O levels, after my O levels, I was going to do biology, English, and geography for my A levels. Then I decided no, I was going to do my O level art in lower 6 and upper 6, and that's what I did because I knew then that I wanted to go into fashion. But back then in Zimbabwe, people of color were involved in garment making, from, let's say, tailors, cutters, pressers. There were no designers. So when I joined the industry, so I actually joined the industry as an intern. I applied to a company, they agreed to take me because my parents had said they were not going to fund me to study fashion because the relatives prior to that who they knew who were in the garment industry were there as tailors and lower than that. So they said, no, we're not going to pay for this. So I said, okay, fine. I'm going to try and figure out how I'm going to do it. So I joined a factory as an intern after my A-levels. And then from there, I went to study in Cape Town, then came back and worked for 2 other factories. Then I got married, moved to a smaller town that had no factory. So then my husband was in textiles. He worked for one of the big textile firms in Zimbabwe called David White Textiles, which was part of London Textiles then. And then he encouraged me to actually start my own fashion business. But I was creative, but I'd not been trained really in business. So from then I went on to take courses where I did business training. And then my first fashion show was, in fact, my first fashion shows outside of Zimbabwe was in DC. And when I went there, met up with some Indian Americans in the US and was really inspired about, cultural identity and, one's identity. And hence I settled on the name Zoa, which means sun in Shona. And then from there went into retail. And what led me to collaborate with artisans is you find that Zimbabwe is full of so many talented artisans. I mean, we are renowned globally for our stone sculptures. So apart from stone, there's beadwork, there's embroidery, there's crochet. So within my brand, I do collaborate with artisans from those different fields to just add depth to the work that I do. And also what inspired me to start the Fashion Council was during my journey, fashion was held within clothing. So fashion was within established factories. So when we started having challenges with our economy here and businesses started to shut down, we had a lot of young designers now standing on their own. So when I first started as a young designer on my own, there was no one to mentor me. So I felt really encouraged to say, you know what, the journey that I took, which was very difficult, those who are coming after me do not need to go through that difficult journey. So we need a community that is there to encourage, inspire, and help others to grow, hence the establishment of the Fashion Council of Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful background. And for both of you, it sounds like definitely you guys took a formal approach to entering into the fashion sector, going to school, which is great. And for you particularly, Joyce, I know you spoke a little bit about the way things were back in Zimbabwe when you wanted to start in the fashion sector. Can you give us a sense of what years you were talking about, so that we can kind of put it into context?
So I entered the factory as an intern in 1991. Yeah.
That long ago
that long ago, yeah. So it's been more than 30 years in the industry.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more now about the work that you both do with artisans. I know for Jose, most of your work is with bark cloth. So can you talk a little bit about first of all, why? I know you mentioned bark cloth as you presented just the last time. Can you talk a little bit about what drew you to bark cloth and how you engage artisans as you use that material in your work?
Okay, so having done my studies and done the research and found this cloth, what was so exciting about it is going to the place where it was made the first time. When I went to the actual place where they make it, it was like coming home. Because even though I had done my research on all the other cottons and bamboos and all the other organic cloths, finding something within my own heritage that I had never ever thought of in terms of in my field of work as clothing was absolutely liberating. And so that moment I hold very special. One of the most important parts of my career, maybe my life. It was understanding how important that process was, the way the tree survives the harvesting, where they look after the tree once harvested, so that it will then generate another crop for another 60 years or more. And yet the trees are also quite crucial to the ecosystem. They balance the ecosystem. They create the perfect place for other, food and animals to thrive, and people as well. So finding that out was such a huge boost to me as an eco-sustainable designer, because then I realized that that was my purpose. When I found out that
How did you
pardon?
how did you find out about the process of bark cloth or the material? Because you were in the UK at the time.
Yes,
So
I went back to the community. This is when I went back to the community. So having found it, come back to the UK, did some kind of experimentation with it, started working and getting really excited. Then I was working here and somebody came to my studio, a friend, a very good friend of mine called Winnie Sanya Sarama. And she said, "What's that in your, hanging in the back of my rails?" And I said, "Well, it is my collection made out of bark cloth." Said, why have we not seen this? And I said, "Well, I don't know how people receive it." So she encouraged me to share this, and especially with people in Uganda. So having worked with it for so many years, and everybody around the world saying to me, like, how do the people in Uganda receive your work? Do they know what you do with it? And this is really important, especially now we're talking about how it affects the people there in these places of the world where we get this cloth from. Taking it to Uganda for the first time in 2014, having worked with it for more than 15 years, was such a special moment because they didn't think it was bark cloth. They thought it was suede, velvet, leather, because I had colored it. And so it was almost like trying to re-educate them on something that was theirs. And so in that same period of time, I think it was the next year I went back there. That's when I went to the community and got to see the making of it. And that's when I knew what my purpose was then, is that I couldn't walk away from this and treat it like, just another thing, holiday, experience. It came back with those men stayed with me. In fact, one of the images I had, sent you to share is of a little boy watching his father make his grandfather making buckle, sitting on a wooden log, again, next to a wooden log, and trying to mimic what his father was doing, his grandfather. And that's how the backcloth is shared to the next generations. Only men make it. It's taught orally by watching, being part of it, immersing yourself in it, and then handed down generation after generation. One of the men I work with, called Paul Katamida, he's had it in his generation for more than 300 years. So he's come along a very, very long line of men who make master craftsmen. His cloth is really super special. And what I get from working with them is that I can actually tell them, I want it soft, I want it stiff, I want it light, I want it. And they respond because they know they can apply this in the process of making it. So I'll just share this because I think I found something in my research that I really think is really important for us to know now, is that the cultural and environmental significance of using indigenous materials is really important for us to address now while we are in this position. It holds significant value by preserving traditional practices and knowledge, connecting people to their land and heritage, while also contributing to environmental sustainability due to the often regenerative and locally sourced nature of these materials, promoting responsible use of resources and minimizing ecological impact. So this here for me is, and I had to read that because I've written this and I always want to give it the credit it deserves. That's how I hold these people. They are really special. I couldn't do what I do, work with the cloth I have, without them. They absolutely matter. And not only do they matter because I get the cloth from them, but because they hold such amazing knowledge about how they live with nature, how they balance things. They understand it's time to do this because the rain is that, or the sun's shining like this, or this. They don't just bulldoze their way through, and just get what they can out of the land. They look after it. But what are we doing? And so this is where my connection with them is important. I show them what I do with it. Their signature is always present in my work. I speak of them, I talk about them, and I encourage them to also get involved and seeing what I do, because that's the only way for them to realize how valuable what they're doing is and how important it is. I've probably gone very off the mark now. So stop me.
So for the artisan communities, how much demand is there still for so beyond supplying you, do they also supply others?
They do supply others, and that's really important. So because of the work that's happened, there's been a gradual turn to the bark cloth from not just the people in Uganda, but across the world. And that's raised the interest in terms of people who are returning back to the villages. Because what happened was the young men who are supposed to be learning how to make this, wanting to obviously earn a living, have left the communities and gone into the cities. And so this tradition almost died, because then the only people who held it or kept doing it were their parents or grandparents. And so what's happened since I got involved, and some other young people and other people in Uganda have got involved, is that the young men who'd left the villages have gone back there to start producing and making bark alongside everything else that they were doing. So, and that's what Bark to the Roots does. It is engaging these people in conversations and encouraging them to stay there. And we buy directly from them. There's no middleman. We go straight to the men who make the bark, and we buy from them, because then they get the full benefit of the funds that are coming in. And that's really, really important, because then they can see the result of what they're making, but they also get the benefit of it. And they, keep this tradition alive.
Okay, I think that's a big area of conversation when it comes to traditional crafts. How do we ensure that the work continues into future generations? So we'll come back to that and let you talk a little bit more about that. So Joyce, now we'll come back to you. So similar question for you as well. How do artisans play a role in your work with Zuva? How do you engage with them in your designs and the work that you do?
Like I mentioned to you, my husband is into textiles, and he grew up in a cotton growing part of Zimbabwe called Gokwe. So his father was a headmaster, but was also a cotton farmer. So he grew up going into the fields, actually cultivating the cotton, harvesting the cotton, taking the cotton through to the cotton marketing board. And when he left school, he joined a textile company, and then later on trained at one of the universities in Bolton, where he did a degree in textile color chemistry and textile technology. And so when I entered fashion, I was immediately drawn to the use of cotton because cotton, prior to independence, we had a lot of commercial white farmers doing cotton, as well as the smallholder farmers doing cotton. And you find a lot of families were and are still being sustained through the growing of cotton in Zimbabwe. And then you find that prior to Zimbabwe being colonized, the Zimbabweans were actually spinning and weaving their own cotton. So you find that there is that traditional practice of hand spinning and hand weaving. And so a couple of years ago, I started a project. We're still working on it, where we are pushing the process of actually the hand weaving and the hand spinning and the hand weaving, and then later on dyeing and printing. So that's one way I've engaged with the artisans, because as a brand, I would like to actually incorporate not just the textile, the cotton textiles that is pushed through the big textile companies, but also cotton textiles that is actually processed through groups of artisans. And cotton, on the textile side, I work with cotton for the fashion, but I also work with women who also do beadwork to incorporate that into my collections, as well as hand embroidery, like I mentioned earlier on. We launched a leather brand into our collection. And with that leather, we're also doing crochet, hand crochet, where I do work with a group of women where we crochet bags especially, and we incorporate leather into the bag work. As well as on the textile side as well, I do also work with a small group but we started this, we stopped it, we are going to carry on, where we do hand dyeing as well as printing, stencil, hand printing. So that's how we have, I've been working with artisans around me to incorporate that into the work that I do as well.
Thank you. And I know that you also have the fashion training program that you run. Do you do any training of artisans as part of that, or teaching people how to work with artisans as part of that program?
So with that, we just mainly do design, pattern making, and garment construction. So we do that in Zimbabwe and out of Zimbabwe. We've had an opportunity to go to Rwanda, where we've trained women SMEs in that area of the garment making and the construction. Because what pushed me into the area of training is I've really seen a lot of young people come into the space and they have no training. They're very creative, but in terms of the technical know-how of how to actually make a pattern, how to put together a garment, to construct a garment, they lack that training. So that is what really pushed me into going into the training. So the training that I do within the institution is mainly to do with the design, pattern making, garment construction, and a bit of the business of fashion. And one of the participants one of the people who joined the meeting today, you greeted, her name is Chris from Belgium. I've collaborated with Chris. Chris does training in a lot of African countries under a German initiative called SES. And she comes in strong on the design side. And then we've done a couple of programs under the government of Zimbabwe, under Zimtrade, which is our export arm of the government. And Chris has come in to help with the training, so that we are training designers to say, whether it's for local consumption or for a global market, that the product has to meet a certain standard.
Thank you. Thank you. So one more question for you before I then also turn the same question over to Jose. So what do you think has allowed you to be successful in engaging and working with artisans? Often you hear so many stories of things not going well, but for you, you've worked with them for a number of years now. What do you think it is that you do that has allowed you to be successful in working?
I believe that if one chooses a particular career path, then one needs to stick with it. And like I've mentioned, one thing that drove me to the training was young people coming into the space and not having adequate training. So for me, it breaks my heart when I see young designers, um, 25, 26-year-olds, and I mean, I've got children who are about that age, and delivering a product that's not up to scratch. And then, that person is looking after themselves. They've got rentals to pay. They have to feed themselves. Maybe they've got kids. They need to send their kids to school. And yet they are involved in a profession where they're not adequately trained, and they're producing a garment that is not competitive. So that is what has really pushed me to try and upscale my own product, and as well as to teach others where I can to also upscale their products.
Great, thank you so much. And then Josie, over to you with the same question. I know you've started to talk about the Bark initiative that you started. Can you share a little bit more about your success working with artisans and what you think it is that has allowed you to achieve that success in your engagement?
The Back to the Roots initiative is an initiative that's designed to support preservation of heritage in the environment. So, and that's working with the people within Uganda. And it's encouraging them to hold on to the idea of sustainability, because I think one of the key things that I found out in my research is the word sustainability does not exist, was not a buzzword in Africa. I mean, it's just, and people didn't realize that the way they lived anyway was already sustainable. In fact, it was a secular way type of living. So because they didn't have that idea in a solid word form, it's difficult to hold on to it. And so when the Western world came with all the quick fixes, plastic bottles and plastic this and disposable that, they took it on, not realizing that they were getting rid of what they naturally had as valuable and taking on what the Western world was feeding them as best. So that's initially, that for me was the most important part of it, is making people aware that their lifestyles are important the way they were already before the influence that came in. And when I talk about them, I'm talking about the people in the rural areas, where when I go now to plant trees, you find plastic everywhere. And that plastic is everywhere because it's just been let to run riot. So it's just taken them back, and they have a name for it. I think the name is Bunansi. It means that we are, that's the name that they've kind of used now in terms of sustainability. And because that now becomes the key thing. So the community I work with is an organic community. They do practice organic farming. And they make sure that all these things are passed on down to the next generation, So that's one key thing. And that was really important. The Back to the Roots sets those standards. But then Back to the Roots, there's two ways of looking at it. It's also going back to the roots. It's going back to what our ancestors did, what they practiced, what they knew worked best in terms of preservation and looking after this. And why do I keep going about this? Because the world we're in today, I felt last year that we've lost our track. There's a lot of greenwashing going on. People don't think it matters anymore. Like climate change is not real. And so we are in a state of, it doesn't matter. But for me, that's why I found this, because I did my research. I knew we couldn't carry on the way we were. this was important to make the change now. So I work with not just the men, I work with the women as well. And the women is value addition, because how it's not just about taking the buck from the community there, it is also teaching people that, like, Joyce is talking about teaching. Education is the most important thing. For the people to understand why it's important to preserve their culture, to preserve their heritage, for the environment, you have to teach them. And education is the key thing from the schools, from the primary school. So we always have primary school children. I think some of the images I shared with you, we're connected with a school there, St. Aloysius, at that particular place where we are connected with. And then St. Agnes in Kampala, St. Agnes Primary School, and then other primary schools and secondary schools that we're connected with. So this education is teaching young women, young men, what's important about not just their culture in terms of their heritage, but also protecting the environment. So what I do with the women is value addition, is weaving. So what we started doing is weaving with organic cotton and the bark cloth, combining the two. And my thing is about not adding chemical or the quick fixes that we're so used to now. Break it down, make it into a fine, fiber, and then start weaving. No. The way I look at it is try and work with it as it is now. Add the most value you can until you can't do any more in its organic state, in its natural state. Then let's talk about technology. I love technology, but there's a place for it, and we can't keep running with it. And that's where I have most of my sculptural pieces. I call them soft sculptures. What they talk about is all these things. They look exciting, but really what the message that is behind them is pretty much just saying, slow down, look at things properly, rethink your choices, just be mindful of, we all have to dress up and look good. We don't have to cost the earth to do this. And so these are the key things, education, working with the women, and then working with men as well. With the men, we do upcycling. So we upcycle with the bark cloth and with other things. We make chairs, we make, decoration things decorating for the interior. We do all kinds of things with it. And this is something that we're sharing very soon. I think you've seen some of it already. And we're working more on this. And I insist on doing most of this work there because I want the value added there. Because Africa, we lose everything and we buy it back in huge, huge volumes of money. So the copper leaves and comes back in this. The gold goes away, comes back. The cotton, and then we buy it back in. And then the tea, we buy it. And then the coffee, do you know what I'm getting to now? Do you get it? We need to add value on the continent and sell from there with the value added. So that's what I'm building up to. It takes time, but we'll get there. So like Joyce was saying, getting people to understand quality is important, finishing is important, design, being able to design one thing today and do exactly the same tomorrow, being able to duplicate and make it so that when they order from you, I want 10 of these, there won't be 10 things looking very different. There'll be 10 things that look the same. Obviously, it's made by hand, so it's never going to be exact, but it will be trying to be the same. Do you get it? I think Joyce knows this. So this is the thing. So it's really getting people to understand that, yes, it's, China makes whatever, but we can do this as well. It's just training the mind, training them so that they know that it's not just being lucky to make one perfect thing today and then tomorrow you don't do it. Consistency is important. Quality is important because that's what the Western mind is looking at. They're looking at, is the product good? Is it going to work? Is it, if I buy the same tomorrow, will it be the same? That is what is important. So all these things matter, and then some more. So I'm not sure that I have answered everything, but I think.
Good answer. But also harping on what you've mentioned, my next question was going to be around the area of challenges that you've experienced.
Okay.
You talked about trying to make sure that then standards are the same across the board. So
Yeah.
how does, if somebody now wants to go, if one of us here who's not working with artisans yet wants to go and engage artisans in producing their fabric,
Mm.
and um, and producing their garments or helping them with the garments that they're producing, how do we ensure things like standards are met, or what are the practical things you would advise people to keep in mind or do when they look to engage artisan communities to ensure that their work is still of the highest standard?
So to start off, you have to make sure that their working conditions are good, because if they don't have a good place to work, they won't produce the standard of work that you're looking for. So it goes back to all those sustainable SDGs, you know, the ethical side of things. Do they have good working conditions? Are they properly looked after? Do they have, you know, a space that they can actually thrive and grow and become better? Are you paying them, you know, properly to make sure that they are going to be able to live on that and then be able to produce what they're producing for you? So there are certain things that you have to, so you have to go back to the SDGs and see what they say and then apply that to what you're doing. So you cannot think about sustainability and not think about the workforce. The workforce is just as important. So that's really key there. But also keeping samples there so that people know that this is how we need to, this is the standard we're aiming for. It's a simple thing, but when you think about it, I mean, even me here in my studio here in the UK, if we don't have a sample there, sometimes it's difficult to kind of explain to some, can't be standing there all day, every day, trying to explain to somebody, this is how I want it. You have to have a sample there. Unless they've done it 1,000 times and they know it so well, you need to have samples there so that they can go back to them and use them to guide them. And then, you know, obviously you have to have a system in place where you have things written. You have, and then you also have to have agreements with them. Because sometimes when people commit to something written, they adhere to it better, from my experience. When you have a written contract and understanding with somebody, I mean, it doesn't mean it's set in stone, but it helps you, guide you along the way, and also sets the rules for both of you. So if you didn't put it in there and you're demanding it, then obviously you've got to answer for that. And then, but one of the challenges I really found was the support from the community there in terms of like the government. Not much support. So pretty much you do everything on your own. You know, there isn't much support, you know, they are not really interested in what we're doing. You know, they want to know, obviously, you're not doing something that's illegal, but in terms of supporting you and making sure that, because one of the challenges I have to say this, is that for me, barcloth to us, to the Ugandans, is like the bogolan, you know, to where it comes from, to the kente in Ghana, the ashoke, the shweshwe. So all these things, all these traditional clothes, wherever they come from, that's what barcloth is to us. It is really special. And so trying to get the government to do something about preserving and making sure this national heritage is protected is, it's like trying to pull teeth. I know that we had a battle with almost losing the name barcloth. UNESCO has recognized it as a World Heritage. And so that really saved the day, because then it made it officially Ugandan heritage cloth. But I am, you know, sometimes it's a battle to try and explain. Okay, there's another reason why Ugandans struggle with it, because it was then relegated to funerals. They use it to wrap the bodies in for funerals. And a lot of young Ugandans who experienced that really felt they couldn't engage with it. What people don't realize, and this is where education is quite important, is that this was done by those ancestors of ours because it mummifies the body, preserves the body, so that when you have people gathering from, you know how in the past people walked away from that, from where they came from and walked forever to try and find food or whatever. And when took months before they came back. So if somebody passed away and they were hoping that the family would, people who'd gone away looking for wealth and whatever had to come back, they would find their body, preserved. So that's what they did. They did this. So in our research, we realized that actually barcloth was a household cloth. It was used in every home and used for everything: room dividers, curtains, bedding, floor, wearing. People got married in this cloth. It was a special thing. So to find us now, in this moment in time where people are so scared of it, it's that's the breakdown in recorded histories, education, and understanding of the importance of things. And that's why I say it's going back twice. It's not back to the roots. It's also going back to the roots and just grabbing back what's important, getting hold of it and preserving it for future generations. I probably went off the mark there.
All relevant, all important. Thank you so much, Jose. Now, Joyce, I'm gonna come back to you again with the same question. What challenges have you faced in your work with artisans? And what practical advice would you give to somebody who's looking to engage you?
So I suppose with the work I've done, I've worked with the different types of artisans as I've laid out previously, and different challenges with different artisans, especially when it comes to the business side of things. So I feel there's a need for training for that lady who's in the village who is doing some beadwork. For that gentleman who's in the village who's working with leather, there needs to be business training put forward to these people for them to be at the same wavelength level as as you engage. And then, unfortunately, with Zimbabwe, we've faced a lot of challenges with our economy. So not just challenges with engaging with artisans, but challenges with our economy. People have really struggled to try and keep their heads above water. But so what happened in Zimbabwe a few years ago is the government of Zimbabwe, in partnership with the EU, came up with an organization called ACVIS, which was the Association of Cotton Valley Editors of Zimbabwe. And I sat on this board representing fashion. And so we were engaging with the whole value chain, starting from the farmer right up to the last one in that chain would be the clothing manufacturer or the fashion designers. And you find that nearly everyone along that value chain has had challenges because of the economy in the country. And also, I suppose when you look at global trends when it comes to sustainable fashion, eco-friendly fashion, is the move away from fabrics that consume a lot of chemicals. So with the cottons, we are hoping to push the agenda of organic cotton because though our cotton in Zimbabwe is not GMO cotton at the moment, we have varieties that we've been using traditionally in the country. But especially as a designer, I would like a situation where there's more research that's put into organic cotton. And also for this cotton, like what Joe said earlier on, that we need to add value. So we are there's a project that I'm currently engaged with certain partners, where we want a situation where value is added in the village. because traditionally, before colonization, value was being added in the village, and that's what people were consuming. So just like Uganda, Zimbabweans did wear bark, they wore hide, and they wore cotton. But with colonization, industrialization, came the commercialization of the cotton process. So even as communal farmers got involved, the harvests were forwarded to the Cotton Marketing Board, which was it was a government parastatal. So nothing was retained within the villages to create employment there. So the farmer is now waiting for the next season to come to plant, to harvest, to sell, and to make a living out of it. So there's a project that we are working on. It's called the Zimbabwe Hand Cotton Processing Project, where we would want a situation where there's processing within the rural areas, where, as mentioned earlier on, those traditional skills that were there before of the hand spinning, hand weaving, we engage farmers in rural areas to be able to add value to a certain percentage of their harvests. And yes, another percentage will be forwarded to the factories for processing, but something needs to be retained within the villages for them to be able to use to actually generate income for themselves. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. I know that we're coming to the hour mark, or we're at the hour mark. So I'm going to ask for those who are in the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat now in the comments. You can also raise your hand with the signal so that we can take your questions as you may have them. And as you're doing that, I'm going to just ask one more question to um, our speakers, which is if there's anything else that you think we may have missed or anything that you want to add as we come to a close, just feel free to share in terms of your experience and working with the artisan communities in your country.
So I suppose, like Jess mentioned earlier on, the issue of, I would summarize it as fair trade, that we need products that we are working on to be compliant, fair trade compliant, not just for the domestic consumption, but also for global consumption, meaning fair wages, ethical practices within the workplace. What else? Oh yeah, there's one thing that I forgot to mention when it in terms of engaging with artisans. There's a project that we're currently doing in Zimbabwe with the German embassy in partnership with another project called My Beautiful Home, where we are working with women artisans in the Matabeleland area, in an area called Matobo. And these women paint their huts after they've harvested their crops. They have beautiful patterns and they use organic paints to paint their huts. And then a French lady called Veronique approached them a few years ago, and she was documenting those beautiful huts. So the German embassy later on joined her and took those huts and put them initially into pots, and then later on partnered the women with different people who wanted that hut painting painted on your wall in your garden, and then later on engaged with fashion through the Fashion Council of Zimbabwe. We engaged with them last year, where we've taken Matobo from the hut, we've now put it onto fabric, and it's now gone into fashion. So I'll share the links with you so you can have a look at some stage. So we would want a situation where that print goes beyond Zimbabwe into Africa, into the rest of the world. It's a cultural heritage preservation project, as well as a woman empowerment project, rural women empowerment project. And we've seen a lot of artisans in the value chain being empowered, from the women to graphic designers, to fashion designers, to pattern makers, to filmmakers, photographers, through this project.
Fantastic. And so I would say that for me, I think the most important thing that I'd like to leave with everyone now, in my advocacy for sustainability and circularity, what I ask anyone who's listening is, it is small steps. Sometimes people think, oh, I can't really change my whole lifestyle. But if you start in a very small way, and that's part of my R3 campaign. My R3 campaign is purely a conversation between the person who makes and the person who buys. We all have choices to make. You make a choice to buy from a sustainable brand, and that gives a knock-on effect in terms of production. They know somebody wants this and they produce more of the same. But if you don't choose to do that, then that dies, and then we go back to where we are trying to fight and preserve and protect. So it's the choices that we make have a far-reaching effect. And so when we choose to buy or to do what we do, we are choosing to either ignore or do something about what needs to be doing now in terms of preserving the natural treasures, and also climate change situation. So all these things are important. So in my advocacy, the R3 campaign, you don't have to sign up to anything. You just make a small decision: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Just 3 words. The word that underpins everything is reduce. If you choose to wear your garment longer, you've reduced how much you're buying, how much you're spending on clothing, but also you're sending a message out there. There's enough out there in terms of garments to clothe the next 6 generations. So we don't really need to be constantly making new garments. And in my practice, I'm not constantly making. And that's one thing I adhere to. So that's one key thing that I'd like to share, is that let's not make sustainability just a greenwashing word. Let's practice it, all of us, in very small little ways, but together we can make a difference and turn this story around. But most importantly, we know that in Africa, there's time to change this. We haven't traveled too far ahead of us in terms of technology. There's time to go back, like Joyce was saying, claim like that cloth you're talking about. You're taking a national, colors, graphics, ideas that are very meaningful to your community, putting them on print and saying, this is us. We're not going to buy this wax print coming in from China anymore. We're making our own. Is that correct, Joyce? Yes. Take back
That's
ownership.
very correct, Joss. That's very correct.
Take back ownership of your heritage. Take it back and make it work in this moment now. But for the future generations, they'll be grateful to all of you for doing something about it. Now is the time.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Words to share. I'm not gonna say to end with, because we're still going. We have a question in the chat, and it's from Rumbi. It says, "Thank you, Jose and Joyce. Really inspiring. How were you willing to sacrifice short-term profits for long-term sustainability gain?"
Do you want to go first, Joyce?
It's okay, Joss. You can go first. Thank you.
Right. What was I willing? I don't think it was really much of a sacrifice. The choice was made for me. My research just said it all. You just have to, like I said, reduce, reuse, recycle, buy less, consume. You don't have to. I design clothes, but I can't tell you I can't remember the last time I made myself something new. I upcycle. I reuse things. I've gone up a size, I make it bigger to fit better. So those sacrifices are necessary because I think we can't ignore what needs to be done. Yeah, but now looking, when people ask me, how did you know that this cloth was going to be what, defines your career? I had no idea. But I felt in my research I needed something that was rustic, organic, and I found it in my heritage, and I was really, really lucky to do that when I did. But it hasn't been easy. It's not easy at all, not very easy. You have to be driven. You have to have a sense of purpose. And yes, sacrifices, yes. But for me, actually, the secret is what centers me most and pushes me to do what I do is my faith. And there you are. So, no sacrifice at all. God is in control. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you, Joss, for that. Very inspiring. So for me, when I look at, like I mentioned, when you look at Zimbabweans, how we dressed prior to colonization was hide, bark, and cotton. And so when I look at even the way I approach my brand, it's almost like a lifestyle brand. And as Joss mentioned earlier on, that people are making trillions from fast fashion. The last research I made, I think, was like before COVID, 3 trillion was a global GDP of fast fashion. That's how much they were contributing. And so I think it's just making a decision that, you know what, this is not, yes, we need to look after ourselves. We need to make money. We need to look after our families, but we need to look after our environment. We need to look after our countries. So we need to adapt a lifestyle that feeds into that whole thing of sustainability. And so hence the issue of the organic cotton, that we need to have a situation where the farmers are introduced to that way of farming, so that we're able to look after our land, so that we are looking after our land, not just for ourselves, but for it's an inheritance for our children and our children's children. So when we do our fashion, it has to be in line with passing this down to the next generation and not destroying it all, so that there's nothing for others to inherit after we have come and gone. So that's how I look at it. And I suppose, like what Joss says, God first.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see if are there any other questions, any other comments from those in the audience? So one question I have, I'll take up a little bit of the time of the audience, is what trend are you all seeing within Zimbabwe and Uganda? Are you finding that more and more young people, whether they're designers or even those whose families engage in traditional crafts, are you finding that more young people are being drawn back? Or are you still seeing that there's still kind of a reticence to kind of engage with artisan communities?
I'll let Joyce go first on this.
Okay, so I'm saying, yes, we have a lot of young people coming into the creative space, but like I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing quite a high percentage of them getting into the space, but without the right training. So it's actually not sustainable in terms of a livelihood for them. There's not enough research, not enough training that goes into some of the brands that I've seen being showcased. So you go to a fashion show, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, if I was a buyer for this organization, that organization, how much would I actually buy from this particular collection that have been showcased? So I would enhance, like I said, the issue of pushing training, and not just through what I'm doing, but even through the training institutions that are here, mainly government run, that the curriculums that are offered for students who are studying must be globally relevant, must push our students who are relevant in industry and who are able not just to join a company, but are able to actually start their own businesses and make a livelihood from that. Over to you, Joss.
I think that I agree with what Joyce is saying. I think the key here is that one of the key things that I found out is that education is important, and within the field that you are going to be working in, even more important, but also the practical is really important. Being able to get a chance to be able to go and work in factories where they make clothing and learn how these things, garment construction is made before you start thinking about earning money from it is really important. I have met so many young designers now in the period from last year. I mean, I've always met them, but significantly now from Uganda over the last year and now. Last year I was was part of the Creative Economy Week in Uganda that was the British Council sponsored. I was one of the collaborators there. And the key thing was, how do you transform from heritage to economics? How do you connect those two things? And what I find now is a lot of young people have re-embraced their heritage in terms of, the bark cloth heritage, but also the other things that are indigenous to Uganda, like the kikoi and the cotton, homemade cotton, handmade cotton, hand woven there. So there is something happening there. And I think it's quite important to see that happen and be encouraged to happen. But one key thing I'd like to advise young creatives is that we very much be inspired and don't copy. Because when you copy somebody else's idea, you lose your chance to create your own signature and give something to the world that only you can give. Because each one of us has been given a gift. We're all able to create and produce amazing things. But when we want a quick fix and just go for somebody else's idea and not try and push through something that we've got in here to bring out here, we lose something. So that's one thing I always share with young designers and young creatives. Be inspired by all means. Go around, look at everything. In the Western world, the internet now gives you everything. Just take inspiration, but find what makes you, you in that inspiration and push with it. That's what I want to share. There is a lot of creativity. And now I think I'm more excited about the African fashion than ever before. There's so much going on there. And I think Joyce feels the same. And Udo, I know you will feel the same because I saw you at Fashion Weeks in Africa last year. There's something happening there, but let's make it for the right reasons. Let's think about the people who are making these things. Think about the earth where these things are coming from, the places where they work. Sustainability must be right there in the center of it all. And then let's move forward with this. Exciting times.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you, Jose. Thank you to you, Joyce. I think we'll bring it to a close at this time. I don't think I see any other questions unless anybody has one in the next few seconds. If not, we'll bring it to a close. I think this has been a great conversation, very insightful. Again, just want to thank Jose and Joyce for just sharing a tad bit of your experiences and your insights. I know that there's so much more that we can hear from you, but of course, because of time, we can't stay here forever. So I would encourage everyone who's on, if you're not already following these wonderful women and their brands, please make sure that you do so. They're both on Instagram. Jose Hendo is Jose Hendo, as it is plainly on Instagram. And then for Joyce, her brand is Zuva, ZUVVA. So please follow them both and just continue to engage with them so that you can learn even more beyond just hearing them speak, just from viewing their designs and seeing the work that they're doing. Because I know that they have so much more to share with us from their incredible years working in the African fashion space. I also want to just express a deep appreciation for our team members, Stacy and Faith. Stacy and Faith, I know you guys are both there. Maybe you can just put a signal or emoji or something, just let us know who you are. Thank you so much for coordinating this session and for making it happen. Your dedication and hard work behind the scenes really do not go unnoticed, and we're so grateful to you both. To everyone that joined us today, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And just by being here, you show that you have a true commitment to helping build the future of our fashion industry and to helping grow the work of artisans and on the continent. My hope is that you are leaving feeling inspired, informed, and hopefully ready to continue to engage and to help drive forward the work in our industry. Please continue to engage with us at BAF. Um, Follow us on Instagram. We are at Building African Fashion. I'm not sure how most of you heard about this session, but we'll add you to our email list going forward. As we have more of these sessions, we'll send you an email so that you can come back and continue to be a part of the conversation so that we can learn together. So thank you so much again. And with that, we'll officially bring the event to a close. Even though it's officially ending, still feel free if you want to stay around a little bit longer and just converse with people, informally while we're on the line. And we'll definitely make the recording available to you in the next few days so that you can also listen back and see what you can glean further from the conversation today. So thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and your evening, and hope to have you back again with us soon. Take care.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you for making time.
Yeah.
Conversation. Thank you so much. Thanks, Udo and team, as always.